The transport ship shuddered as it broke through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Dr. Lee Hanna pressed her face against the small window and watched the alien world grow larger below. Red sand stretched for miles in every direction. Strange blue, plants dotted the landscape like scattered jewels. This would be her home for the next year. Hanna adjusted the medical bag on her shoulder and checked her orders one more time. Combat medic assignment to Forward Operating Base Meridian. Support role for Delta Squad, an elite human SEAL team. The paper felt rough between her fingers as she folded it and tucked it into her uniform pocket. The other passengers on the transport were mostly supply clerks and communications specialists. None of them looked like soldiers. Hanna kept her head down and said nothing during the 3-hour flight from the orbital station. She had learned long ago that talking too much led to questions she could not answer. The transport landed with a heavy thud on the metal platform of FOB Meridian. Through the window, Hanna could see the base stretching out before her. Human-built structures stood next to strange alien buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like crystals. Tall creatures with scaled skin and 4 arms walked between the buildings alongside humans in military uniforms. "Welcome to paradise," muttered the pilot as he opened the rear hatch. Hot, dry air rushed into the cabin. It smelled like metal and ozone with something else underneath that Hanna could not identify. She grabbed her 2 bags and walked down the ramp. The gravity felt lighter than Earth normal, making each step feel like she might bounce into the air. Above her, 2 suns burned in a purple sky. She had read about this in the briefing files, but seeing it made her stomach twist with homesickness. "Dr. Lee Hanna," called a voice from across the landing platform. She turned to see a tall man in Navy fatigues walking toward her. His uniform was clean but worn, and he moved with the controlled stride of someone who had seen real combat. "Commander Park Ji-ho," the man said, extending his hand. "Delta Squad leader, I am here to escort you to your quarters." Hanna shook his hand. His grip was firm but not trying to prove anything. Good. She had worked with enough military men to know the difference between confidence and posturing. "Thank you, Commander. I am ready to begin my duties." Park studied her face for a moment longer than necessary. "Your medical records show extensive trauma surgery training, field experience in hostile environments. That is exactly what we need. Here." They walked together across the base. Hanna noticed how Park's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. He was watching the rooftops, the shadows between buildings, the alien personnel they passed. Old habits from someone who had learned to stay alive in dangerous places. "Tell me about the situation here," Hanna said as they walked. "Complicated," Park replied. "We are part of a coalition force. Humans, Draconians, and the Stellar Confederacy working together against something called the Void Collective. Problem is, the alien commanders think humans are only good for support roles. Medical, logistics, communications. They do not want us in real combat." They passed a group of Draconian soldiers drilling in formation. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick scales covering their bodies. Their movements were precise, but rigid, following patterns that looked like they had been practiced 10,000 times. "They are strong," Hanna observed. "Strong, yes, but predictable. They fight the same way their ancestors fought 1,000 years ago. Honor and tradition matter more than adapting to new threats." Park led her to a building that looked like it had been assembled from prefabricated sections. Human construction, practical and efficient. Inside, the corridors were narrow but well lit. Signs pointed toward the medical bay, armory, and living quarters. "Here we are," Park said, stopping at a door marked Medical Staff Quarters 7. "Your room. Mine is 2 doors down. The rest of Delta Squad lives on this corridor too. We try to stay together when possible." Hanna's room was small but clean. A narrow bed, desk, and storage locker took up most of the space. A single window looked out toward the alien section of the base where crystalline structures rose like frozen lightning into the purple sky. "Dinner is at 1800 hours in the human section mess hall," Park said. "You can meet the rest of the squad, then. We have a mission briefing at 800 tomorrow." After Park left, Hanna unpacked her belongings. She hung her uniforms in the locker and arranged her medical supplies on the desk. At the bottom of her second bag, wrapped in a spare shirt, was A small wooden box. She opened it carefully and looked at the contents for a long moment before closing it again and placing it in the bottom drawer of the desk. That evening in the mess hall, she met the rest of Delta Squad. Sergeant Kim Taman was a big man with gentle eyes who specialized in heavy weapons. Corporal Yoon Daeho handled communications and spoke 3 alien languages fluently. Private First Class Choi Hyunwoo looked too young to be a soldier, but Park introduced him as their demolitions expert. "Doc, you ever work with special operations before?" Taman asked as they ate something that might have been chicken. "Some field experience," Hana replied carefully. "Mostly emergency surgery and forward positions." "Good," said Daeho, "because where we go, the regular medics cannot follow." After dinner, Park walked with her toward their quarters. The base was quieter now, with most personnel either asleep or on night watch. Alien patrol craft moved silently overhead, their lights creating strange shadows on the ground. "Can I ask you something, Doc?" Park said as they walked. "Your file shows you transferring from the 75th Medical Battalion. That is a support unit. But something about the way you move, the way you watch everything around us. You have training beyond medical school." Hana stopped walking and looked at him. In the light from the base's towers, she could see that Park's eyes were sharp and intelligent. He had noticed things that most people missed. "I have training in many things, Commander. Right now I am your medic. That is what matters." Park nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But if you ever want to talk about those other things, I am a good listener." As they reached their quarters, an alarm sounded across the base. Not the sharp wail of an attack warning, but the steady tone that meant incoming priority message. Through her window, Hana could see lights coming on in the command center. "Briefing moved up to 600, Park said, reading a message on his communicator. "Looks like we have a mission sooner than expected." Hana watched him walk to his own room. After her door closed, she sat on her narrow bed and thought about the wooden box in her desk drawer. Inside were medals and commendations that told a different story about Dr. Lee Hana. A story about someone who had once commanded soldiers instead of healing them. But that was the past. Tomorrow she would be what her order said she was. A medic assigned to keep elite soldiers alive in hostile territory. Nothing more and nothing less. The briefing room buzzed with tension at 0600 hours. Commander Park sat with his Delta Squad in the back row, while alien officers filled the front seats. General Kethvar, a massive draconian with silver scales and 4 powerful arms, stood at the front next to a holographic display. Admiral Zephon 9 from the Stellar Confederacy floated beside him, his blue energy form shifting like liquid light. Dr. Hana entered quietly and took a seat next to Taman. She carried her medical bag and a tablet for taking notes. To everyone in the room, she looked like exactly what her orders said she was. Support personnel. "The target is Mining Station Omega 7, General Kethvar announced. His voice was deep and gravelly, like rocks grinding together. "Intelligence reports show the Void Collective has taken control of the facility 6 days ago. They are using it to extract rare minerals needed for their war machines." The holographic display showed a spinning image of the mining station. It looked like a metal spider attached to a large asteroid. Multiple arms reached out from a central hub to dig into the rock surface. Defensive turrets dotted the structure like deadly flowers. "Estimated enemy strength is 40 Void Collective units," Admiral Zephon 9 added. His voice sounded like music played through water. "Our forces will number 67. Victory should be certain if we follow established protocols." Hana studied the display carefully. She counted the defensive positions and noted the approach routes marked in green light. Something felt wrong about the plan, but she kept her thoughts to herself. "Human forces will provide medical support and communications backup," General Kethvar continued. "Draconian assault teams will take the primary objectives while Stellar Confederacy units secure the perimeter. Questions?" Commander Park raised his hand. "Sir, Delta Squad requests permission to join the assault teams. We have experience in close quarters combat." The Draconian general's eyes narrowed. "Negative, Commander. Humans will remain in support roles. This is not open for discussion." 2 hours later, Hana found herself crammed into a Stellar Confederacy transport ship with the rest of Delta Squad. Through the small windows, she could see the mining station growing larger as they approached. It looked bigger than the holographic display had suggested, with more defensive turrets than the briefing had mentioned. "Doc, you okay?" Taman asked. "You look worried." Hana checked her medical supplies one more time. "Just thinking about casualty estimates. Based on the defensive layout, I would recommend having trauma surgery equipment ready." "How much trauma surgery equipment?" Park asked quietly. "A lot," Hana replied. The first wave of draconian assault craft reached the mining station and immediately came under heavy fire. Hana watched through the transport's rear camera as bright energy beams laced through space. Several draconian ships were hit and began spinning out of control. "Enemy strength appears higher than estimated," came a voice over the communication system. "Requesting additional support." "Negative," General Kethvar replied. "Maintain assault formation Alpha 7. All units advance on primary objectives." Hana felt her stomach drop. Formation Alpha 7 was a frontal assault pattern designed for overwhelming weaker enemies. Against prepared defensive positions with superior numbers, it would be a disaster. The transport shuddered as it docked with the mining station's outer ring. Through the airlock, Hana could hear the sound of weapons fire and alien voices shouting orders. The battle was not going well. "Delta Squad, establish medical station in Cargo Bay C," Park ordered. "Doc, how many casualties are you expecting?" "Too many," Hana said simply. They ran through the station's corridors, following painted arrows toward their assigned position. The walls shook from explosions somewhere deeper in the facility. Emergency lights flashed red, casting strange shadows that made everything look like a nightmare. Cargo Bay C was a large open space near the station's outer edge. Hana immediately began setting up her medical equipment while the SEALs established security positions at the entrances. Within minutes, the first wounded soldiers began arriving. A draconian warrior stumbled through the door with severe burns on his left side. Behind him, 2 Stellar Confederacy soldiers carried a third who was missing an arm. The injuries were exactly what Hana had expected, the kind that came from walking into a prepared killing field. "Taman, I need you to help move patients," Hana called out as she worked on the burned draconian. "Deho, get me a direct line to the command ship, medical priority." As more wounded arrived, Hana found herself running between patients like a conductor directing an orchestra. She stabilized the most critical cases first, then moved to those who could wait. Her hands worked automatically while her mind processed what she was seeing. "Commander Park," she called out during a brief break between casualties. "The enemy positions are not what the briefing indicated. Based on the wound patterns I am seeing, they have overlapping fields of fire covering all the main approaches." Park looked at her sharply. "Explain that in soldier terms, Doc." "Our people are walking into crossfire zones. Every time they try to advance, they are being hit from multiple directions. The enemy knows exactly where we are going before we get there." More wounded soldiers were brought in. A young draconian female with a chest wound grabbed Hana's arm as she worked. "The humans," she whispered. "Why are the humans not fighting? We need their help." Through her earpiece, Hana could hear the radio chatter from the assault teams. Units were taking heavy casualties trying to reach objectives that should have been lightly defended. The Stellar Confederacy forces were pinned down in the outer sections while draconian teams bled themselves dry against prepared positions. "Doc, we have a problem," Deho called out from his communication station. "Command is ordering another frontal assault. Same approach routes, same formation." Hana felt something cold settle in her stomach. She looked around the medical station, at the growing number of wounded soldiers. Most were young, barely old enough to be away from their home worlds. They were dying because someone was making the same mistake over and over again. "Commander Park," she said quietly. "May I speak with you privately?" They stepped to a corner of the cargo bay where the noise of medical equipment would cover their conversation. Park's expression was grim as he watched another group of wounded soldiers being carried in. "The current approach is not working," Hana said carefully. "If I were planning this assault, I would recommend using the maintenance tunnels on levels 7 and 9. They appear to be undefended and lead directly to the central power station." Park stared at her for a long moment. Doc, how do you know about maintenance tunnel layouts? That information was not in the briefing. I noticed them on the station. Schematics. Medical training includes facility layout analysis for casualty evacuation planning. It was not exactly a lie, but it was not the complete truth either. Park seemed to understand that there was more to the story. What else would you recommend? He asked quietly. Hana glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Disable their communications first. Most of their defensive coordination depends on linked fire control systems. Take out the central communications hub, and their overlapping fields of fire become isolated strong points that can be bypassed or taken individually. That is very detailed tactical analysis for a medic. Before Hana could respond, the lights in the cargo bay flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. Over the communication system came General Kethvar's voice, tight with strain. All units, fall back to secondary positions. Repeat, all units fall back. We are taking too many casualties. Hana looked at the growing number of wounded soldiers around her medical station. Young faces, alien and human alike, all paying the price for tactical mistakes that could have been avoided. She made a decision that would change everything. Commander Park, she said firmly, request permission to accompany Delta Squad on a reconnaissance mission to assess alternative approach routes. Park's eyes widened slightly. Doc, that is not a medical mission. No, Hana agreed. It is not. 3 weeks after the mining station assault, Dr. Hana sat in her small quarters reviewing medical reports. On her desk lay files from 7 different missions across 4 star systems. To anyone who looked, they appeared to be standard medical documentation. But hidden within the casualty reports and treatment recommendations was something else entirely. Commander Park knocked on her door at 2100 hours. Doc, got a minute? Hana quickly closed the files and gestured for him to sit on the single chair. Park looked tired. They all did. The war against the Void Collective was not going well for the coalition forces. I wanted to talk about the pattern, Park said quietly. What pattern? Hana asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. Every mission where you provide detailed medical recommendations, our casualty rates drop by 60%. Every time you suggest specific evacuation routes, we end up in perfect position to flank enemy positions. Every time you recommend defensive formations for medical safety, we hold ground that other units cannot. Park leaned forward in his chair. 3 days ago on Theta Station, you suggested we set up the medical post behind what you called optimal cover for patient protection. That cover turned out to be the exact spot needed to provide suppressing fire for the main assault. Hana said nothing. She had been careful, but not careful enough. Yesterday, on the supply convoy escort, you recommended a route that would minimize medical response time. That route avoided 3 ambush sites that hit other convoys. The Draconian unit that followed standard doctrine lost half their vehicles. I study the terrain carefully, Hana said. Medical response requires understanding of tactical situations. Doc, I have worked with combat medics for 15 years. None of them analyze terrain like you do. None of them write medical reports that read like intelligence briefings when you know how to decode them. Through her small window, Hana could see alien patrol craft moving across the purple sky. The base was always busy now. More wounded arriving daily, more missions launching to replace failed objectives. What do you want me to say, Commander? I want you to tell me who you really are. Hana was quiet for a long moment. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out the small wooden box. Inside were medals and commendations that told a different story. A bronze star, a silver star, a distinguished service cross, and at the bottom, a set of lieutenant colonel insignia. Park's eyes widened as he read the names on the citations. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Hana, Strategic Planning Division, Combat Operations Specialist. He looked up at her. You are the woman who planned the defense of New Sol Colony. That was a long time ago. That was 2 years ago. It is considered one of the most brilliant defensive actions in modern military history. You held off a force 10 times your size for 3 weeks until reinforcements arrived. Hana closed the box and put it back in the drawer. And then I was transferred to medical. Course, officially for refusing a direct order, unofficially for questioning the strategic wisdom of high command too many times. So they made you a medic? They made me disappear. Put my tactical knowledge somewhere it could not embarrass anyone important. But knowledge has a way of being useful, even when you try to hide it. Park stood and walked to the window. Below them, another transport was landing with wounded soldiers from the latest failed assault on the Void Collective stronghold in the Centauri system. The alien commanders are starting to notice, he said. General Kethvar asked me yesterday why human units have better survival rates. Admiral Zephon 9 wants to know how our medical recommendations keep resulting in tactical advantages. What? Did you tell them? That humans are naturally good at adapting to local conditions, but they are not stupid, Doc. They are going to figure it out eventually. 2 days later, Hana found herself in the most difficult position yet. Delta Squad had been assigned to support a joint operation to retake a communications relay station on the edge of Draconian space. The mission was critical because the relay controlled hyperspace communications for 3 entire sectors. The briefing was held in the largest conference room on the base. General Kethavar commanded the operation with Admiral Zephon 9, providing fleet support. 200 coalition soldiers would assault the station, while human units provided their usual support roles. Hana sat in the back with her medical tablet, taking notes that looked routine but were actually a complete tactical analysis. The enemy had turned the communication station into a fortress. Every approach was covered by interlocking defensive fire. The planned assault would be a massacre. Enemy strength is estimated at 80 units, General Kethvar announced. Our forces number 230, standard assault formation, will overwhelm their positions within 4 hours. Hana watched the holographic display and felt sick. The Draconian general was planning to use the same frontal assault tactics that had failed in every previous engagement. He had learned nothing from the earlier defeats. After the briefing, she found herself walking with Commander Park toward the transport bays. Around them, alien soldiers prepared for another doomed assault using tactics that were 1,000 years out of date. Doc, I need your honest assessment, Park said quietly. How bad is this going to be? Catastrophic. The enemy has spent weeks turning that station into a killing ground. Every approach route leads through overlapping fields of fire. The communication arrays themselves have been converted into weapon platforms. And your recommendations? Hana stopped walking. They were alone in a corridor between 2 sections of the base. There is a thermal exhaust port on the station's underside. It leads to the main power distribution center. A small team could infiltrate through that route and disable the defensive systems from inside. How small a team? 5 people, 6 at most. But they would need to be very good at close-quarters combat and demolitions work. Park smiled grimly. I know just the team. But we would need someone to coordinate the timing with the main assault. Someone who understands both the internal layout and the external defensive positions. Someone would need to go with the infiltration team. Hana agreed. Doc, if you go on this mission, there will be no hiding what you really are anymore. The alien commanders will know that Earth's forces have capabilities they never suspected. Hana thought about the wounded soldiers she had treated over the past month. Young faces from a dozen different worlds, all paying the price for outdated tactics and rigid thinking. She thought about the families who would never see their children again because someone was too proud to adapt. Commander Park, request permission to accompany Delta Squad on a special reconnaissance mission during the main assault. What kind of reconnaissance mission? The kind that wins wars. That night, Hana sat in her quarters writing what might be her last medical report. But this time, she did not hide her tactical recommendations in medical terminology. She wrote them clearly and directly, knowing that after tomorrow's mission, her secret would be over. The report outlined a complete analysis of Void Collective tactics and recommended countermeasures based on human adaptive combat doctrines. It explained how rigid alien military traditions were being exploited by an enemy that learned and adapted after every engagement. At the bottom of the report, she signed her real name and rank for the first time in 2 years. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Hana, Strategic Operations Division. Tomorrow, the coalition would learn what human tactical thinking could accomplish when it was not hidden behind medical reports and casualty statistics. For better or worse, there would be no more pretending to be just a medic. The assault on the communications relay station began at 600 hours with a massive bombardment from stellar Confederacy warships. Dr. Hana crouched in the belly of a stealth transport with Delta Squad, watching the explosions light up space through a small porthole. In 12 hours, either the coalition would control the most important communications hub in 3 sectors, or they would lose 200 of their best soldiers. Thermal exhaust port coming up in 30 seconds, reported Deho from the pilot seat. Doc, you sure this entrance exists? It exists, Hana replied, checking her equipment one final time. Instead of her usual medical bag, she carried demolition charges and tactical gear. The question is whether we can get through it before the main assault fails. The transport shook as enemy fighters swept past, hunting for the main coalition fleet. Through the communication system, Hana could hear General Kethvar coordinating the frontal assault. His troops were advancing in perfect formation toward prepared defensive positions, just like every other failed mission. Delta Squad, we are approaching the station's underside, came the pilot's voice. Prepare for insertion. Commander Park activated his helmet communicator. Remember, once we are inside, Doc takes point on navigation. She knows the layout better than our intelligence files. Sergeant Taman looked at Hana with concern. No offense, Doc, but this is not exactly standard medical work. No, Hana agreed, attaching rappelling gear to her belt. It is not. The transport docked with a soft clang against the station's hull. Through the airlock, Hana could see the thermal exhaust port exactly where she had predicted. It was barely large enough for one person at a time, and it led down into the station's mechanical systems. I go first, she announced, ignoring the surprised looks from the SEALs. If there are defensive measures inside, I need to identify them before the rest of you follow. Before anyone could argue, Hana dropped through the port and into the darkness below. Her boots hit metal grating after a 10-foot fall. Emergency lighting cast red shadows through a maze of pipes and power conduits. The air smelled like hot electronics and recycled atmosphere. Clear, she called upward. Follow my route exactly. There are motion sensors every 20 meters. One by one, Delta Squad dropped into the maintenance tunnel. Park landed beside her and immediately noticed how she moved through the mechanical systems. She avoided sensor zones without hesitation and picked routes through the maze like she had studied the blueprints for years. Doc, how do you know where the sensors are? Deho whispered as they crawled through a narrow service tunnel. Maintenance protocols are standardized across most space stations. Sensors are always placed to monitor main access routes, not emergency repair paths. It was true, but not the whole truth. Hana had memorized the complete layout of this station type during her time in strategic operations. She had planned assaults on identical facilities and knew every weakness in their design. They reached the power distribution center after 20 minutes of careful movement. Through a maintenance grate, Hana could see the main control room where enemy technicians monitored the battle outside. Void collective soldiers, pale humanoids in black armor, moved between control stations with mechanical precision. 12 hostiles, Park observed quietly. Standard assault would alert the whole station. Hana studied the room layout and the positioning of the enemies. Hyunwoo, place charges on the main power conduits. When I give the signal, blow them. The emergency lighting will activate, giving us 15 seconds of confusion before backup power stabilizes. How do you know they're emergency protocols? Taman asked. Because I helped write the tactical manual for assaulting stations like this one. The SEALs stared at her for a moment, then began following her orders without question. Park positioned himself at the main entrance while Deho prepared to jam communications. Hyunwoo placed demolition charges with practiced efficiency. Execute, Hana whispered. The charges detonated with a muffled roar. Main lighting died instantly, plunging the control room into darkness except for the dim red glow of emergency systems. In the confusion that followed, Delta Squad moved like shadows among the enemy positions. Hana found herself face to face with a Void collective soldier who had been reaching for an alarm switch. Her training took over. In 2 quick movements, The enemy was unconscious and she was at his control station, fingers flying over alien keyboards. "Defensive grid is down," she announced. "External weapon systems offline. Communications jammed." Through the control room windows, they could see the main battle raging outside. Coalition forces were advancing against positions that no longer had coordinated fire control. For the first time in months, alien soldiers were breaking through enemy lines. "Doc," Park said, staring at her with amazement. "You just disabled an entire fortress in under 5 minutes." Before Hana could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. Emergency blast doors started closing, trying to contain the damage. But it was too late. The coalition assault was succeeding because the enemy could no longer coordinate their defense. "We need to get out of here," Deho said, monitoring enemy communications. "They are sending reinforcements to this section." "Negative," Hana replied, still working at the control station. "I can access their tactical database from here. If I can download their deployment patterns, we can predict their movements for the next 6 months." "Doc, that is intelligence work, not medical work." "No, it is strategic operations work, and right now, it is more important than getting out alive." Her fingers flew over the alien controls, downloading terabytes of tactical data while enemy soldiers pounded on the blast doors outside. The metal was beginning to buckle under their assault weapons. 30 seconds, she announced. "Almost finished." "Doc, we need to go now," Park said urgently. The blast door exploded inward and Void Collective soldiers poured into the control room. But instead of finding medical personnel and support troops, they faced 5 humans who moved and fought like elite special forces. The battle was brief and decisive. When the shooting stopped, Hana was still at the control station, completing the data download. Blood ran down her left arm from a graze wound, but her hands never stopped working. "Download complete," she announced. "Now we can leave." They fought their way back to the thermal exhaust port through corridors full of enemy soldiers who could no longer coordinate their response. Without central command, the Void Collective defenders were isolated and confused. But as they reached the transport, General Kethavar's voice crackled over the communication system. "All human units report to the command ship immediately upon return to base. Priority Alpha." Park looked at Hana as they climbed aboard the transport. "I think our secret is out." "Yes," Hana agreed, watching the captured station fall to coalition forces through the porthole. "I think it is." The flight back to Afab Meridian took 3 hours. During that time, reports came in from across the sector. Coalition forces were achieving their first major victories in months. Enemy positions that had seemed impregnable were falling to coordinated assaults that exploited weaknesses in Void Collective tactics. When they landed, General Kethvar and Admiral Zephon 9 were waiting on the platform with a full honor guard. Their expressions were unreadable, but their body language suggested this was not a celebration. "Dr. Lihana," General Kethvar said formally, "you will accompany us to the command center. We have questions." As they walked across the base, alien soldiers stopped what they were doing to stare. Word had already spread about the human medic who had single-handedly disabled an enemy fortress. Some looked amazed. Others looked suspicious. In the command center, Hana found herself facing the complete coalition leadership. General Kethvar, Admiral Zephon 9, and commanders from 6 different species all watched her with intense interest. "Explain," General Kethvar said simply. Hana straightened her shoulders and met their stares directly. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Lee Hana, Strategic Operations Division, Earth Defense Corps. I was assigned to this unit under medical cover to assess coalition tactical effectiveness." "You have been spying on us," Admiral Zephon 9 observed. "No, I have been trying to keep you alive." The room fell silent. Finally, General Kethvar spoke again. "Your tactical recommendations have saved thousands of lives, but you deceived us about your capabilities. I followed my orders, but those orders are no longer relevant. The coalition needs strategic leadership more than it needs another medic." General Kethvar and Admiral Zephon 9 exchanged looks. Then, the Draconian general did something unexpected. He saluted. "Colonel Hana, The Coalition would be honored to have your tactical expertise in an official capacity. For the first time in 2 years, Hana stood at attention and returned the salute. I accept the assignment, General. Colonel Lee Hana stood before the largest holographic display she had ever seen. The three-dimensional map showed 17 star systems across Coalition space, each one marked with red symbols indicating void collective strongholds. For 2 weeks, she had studied every detail of enemy positions while Coalition leaders debated whether to trust a human with strategic command. The debate is over, General Kethavar announced as he entered the command center. Behind him walked Admiral Zephan 9 and representatives from 12 different Coalition species. The Council has voted. Colonel Hana will lead the counter-offensive. Hana turned from the display to face the assembled commanders. Some looked pleased with the decision. Others appeared skeptical. A few seemed openly hostile to the idea of taking orders from a human. "Thank you for your confidence," Hana said simply. "I will not disappoint you." Commander Park and Delta Squad stood at attention near the back of the room. Over the past 2 weeks, they had served as her unofficial staff while she planned what would either be the Coalition's greatest victory or its final defeat. "Explain your strategy," Admiral Zephan 9 requested, his energy form shifting colors with curiosity. Hana activated the holographic controls. The display zoomed in to show 3 specific star systems. The Void Collective has spent 8 months building defensive positions in these sectors. Every stronghold is connected by their hyperspace communication network. They coordinate all defensive actions through a central artificial intelligence. She highlighted the connections between enemy bases. This central coordination is their greatest strength. It allows them to predict our movements and respond with perfect timing. But it is also their greatest weakness. "Explain," General Kethavar rumbled. "Artificial intelligence learns from patterns. For 8 months we have attacked using traditional military doctrine. Frontal assaults, siege tactics, attrition warfare. The enemy AI has adapted to expect these approaches." The display changed to show tactical formations. But human combat doctrine is based on unpredictability. We use feints, misdirection, and adaptive tactics that change during battle. The AI cannot learn from patterns that do not exist. A draconian commander named Colonel Vorth stepped forward. "You propose we abandon proven military traditions for human experimentation?" "I propose we combine the best of both approaches," Hana replied calmly. Draconian strength and discipline, stellar confederacy technology and precision, human adaptability and tactical innovation. She manipulated the display to show her complete battle plan. "We will attack simultaneously in 3 different systems using 3 completely different tactical approaches. The AI will try to analyze each attack and develop countermeasures, but by the time it adapts to one approach, we will have already switched to another." "This is madness," Colonel Vorth said bluntly. "No military force can coordinate 3 different tactical systems simultaneously." "No traditional military force," Hana agreed. "But we are not traditional. We are a coalition of different species with different strengths. For the first time, I propose we use those differences as an advantage instead of trying to force everyone to fight the same way." General Kethavar studied the holographic display carefully. "Show us the specific details." For the next hour, Hana outlined the most complex military operation in Coalition history. The First Fleet would attack the Centauri system using traditional draconian assault formations, but with human-style adaptive modifications that changed every 20 minutes. The Second Fleet would hit the Vega system using stellar confederacy, precision strikes guided by human intelligence analysis that deliberately fed false patterns to enemy sensors. "And the Third Fleet?" Admiral Zephan 9 asked. Hana smiled. "The Third Fleet attacks the enemy's main stronghold in the Alpha Centauri system using pure human special operations doctrine. Small teams, maximum unpredictability, psychological warfare, designed to confuse artificial intelligence. You want to attack their strongest position with the smallest force?" Colonel Vorth demanded. "I want to attack their strongest position with the most confusing force," Hana corrected. "While they focus on trying to understand what we are doing in Alpha Centauri, the First and Second Fleets will crush their supporting bases." The room fell silent as the coalition commanders absorbed the audacity of the plan. They would be gambling, everything on the assumption that human tactical thinking could confuse an artificial intelligence that had learned to counter traditional military approaches. "How long do you estimate the operation will take?" General Kethvar asked finally. 6 days if everything goes perfectly. 2 weeks if we encounter major problems. If we fail completely, it will not matter how long it takes. 3 days later, Hana stood on the bridge of the coalition flagship Harmony of Worlds as 3 massive fleets prepared to jump to hyperspace. Around her, alien officers worked at control stations while human tactical advisors provided real-time analysis updates. "Fleets report ready," Commander Park announced from his position as Fleet Communications Coordinator. "Awaiting your orders, Colonel." Through the main view screen, Hana could see hundreds of warships from dozens of different worlds. Draconian battlecruisers with their distinctive angular designs. Stellar Confederacy vessels that looked like crystalline works of art. Human ships that appeared small and fragile compared to their alien counterparts but were packed with advanced technology. "Execute Operation Confusion," Hana commanded. Space around the flagship twisted as the hyperspace generators activated. One moment they were in coalition space near the border worlds. The next moment they were deep in enemy territory, surrounded by void collective defensive platforms that began firing immediately. "First Fleet reporting successful insertion in Centauri system," came the voice of General Kethvar over the communication system. "Beginning adaptive assault pattern Alpha." "Second Fleet in position at Vega," Admiral Zephon-9 reported. "Precision strike teams are engaging primary targets." On the main tactical display, Hana watched 3 separate battles unfold simultaneously. In the Centauri system, Draconian forces were advancing using traditional formation attacks, but changing their approach every 20 minutes just as the enemy AI began to adapt. Confusion markers appeared on enemy positions as their defensive coordination lagged behind the tactical shifts. In the Vega system, Stellar Confederacy forces were conducting surgical strikes against specific targets, while human intelligence teams fed false sensor data to enemy networks. The AI was receiving contradictory information about coalition force strength and positions, causing defensive responses to be delayed or misdirected. But it was in Alpha Centauri where the real chaos was happening. Delta Squad and 11 other human special operations teams were conducting simultaneous raids on 17 different targets, using tactics that seemed to make no tactical sense. They would attack a minor communication relay with overwhelming force, then assault a major defensive platform with a single infiltration team. "Enemy AI response is exactly as predicted," reported Lieutenant Commander Song, Hana's new intelligence officer. "It is attempting to analyze our tactical patterns but finding none that match its training database." "Estimated time until AI adaptation?" Hana asked. "At current confusion levels, approximately 18 hours. But Colonel, the enemy is beginning to respond with random defensive actions. If their AI cannot find patterns to counter, it may switch to completely unpredictable responses." Hana nodded. This was the critical phase of the operation. Either the Void Collective AI would collapse under the weight of analyzing too many contradictory tactical approaches, or it would adapt by becoming as unpredictable as human forces. "All fleets, this is Colonel Hana," she announced over the general communication channel. "Prepare to implement Phase 2 of the operation." "Phase 2?" Commander Park asked quietly. "Colonel, Phase 2 was not part of the briefing." Hana smiled, as she watched enemy defensive formations beginning to show signs of strain across 3 different star systems. "Phase 2 is what we do when the enemy AI tries to outthink us by becoming unpredictable." "And what is that?" "We become completely predictable," Hana replied. "Nothing confuses an artificial intelligence more than suddenly switching from chaos to perfect order, when it finally adapts to expect chaos." On the tactical display, coalition forces across 3 systems simultaneously switched from their complex, adaptive tactics to simple, straightforward assault patterns. The effect on enemy defensive coordination was immediate and catastrophic. The Void Collective AI, which had just adapted to expect unpredictable human tactics, suddenly found itself facing perfectly predictable traditional military approaches. Its decision-making processes froze for critical seconds as it tried to analyze why the coalition had abandoned the very tactics that had been working. Enemy defensive coordination is collapsing, Song reported with amazement. All three systems are showing massive failures in fire control and unit coordination. Through the view screen, Hana watched Void collective defensive platforms beginning to fire at empty space, while coalition forces advanced unopposed toward their primary objectives. Sometimes, she said quietly to Park, the most unpredictable thing you can do is exactly what the enemy expects you to do, but only after you have taught them not to expect it. The coalition fleet hung in space above the burning remains of 3 Void collective strongholds. Colonel Lee Hana stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching victory reports stream in from across the sector, but her expression remained grim as she studied the tactical display. Colonel, all primary objectives have been secured, reported Lieutenant Commander Song. Enemy resistance has collapsed in 14 of 17 target systems. And the remaining 3 systems? Hana asked. Commander. Park consulted his tactical tablet. Radio silence from all 3. No enemy activity detected for the past 6 hours. General Kathvar approached the command station, his 4 arms clasped behind his back in a gesture of satisfaction. An outstanding victory, Colonel. The Void collective has been broken. We should begin consolidation operations immediately. Hana shook her head. No, General. This is not over. It is just beginning. She manipulated the holographic display to show the larger galactic map. Beyond the captured systems lay a vast region of space marked with question marks and warning symbols. The systems we just captured were defensive outposts. Important, but not critical. The real prize lies deeper in Void collective territory. The third core nexus, Admiral Zephyr 9 said, his energy form flickering with understanding. Their central command system. Exactly. Every enemy action for the past 8 months has been coordinated from a single location. If we destroy it, we end this war permanently. If we allow it to adapt and rebuild, everything we just accomplished becomes meaningless. The assembled coalition commanders exchanged glances. What Hana was suggesting was the military equivalent of madness. The core nexus lay at the heart of enemy territory, protected by defenses that no coalition force had ever approached. Colonel, our forces are exhausted from 3 days of continuous combat, protested Colonel Vorth. The enemy will expect us to consolidate our gains. Any assault on the core nexus would be suicide. The enemy will expect us to consolidate, Hana agreed, which is exactly why we must attack immediately. The Void Collective AI is still processing what happened during our last operation. It is confused, trying to rebuild its tactical models. We have perhaps 12 hours before it completes that process and becomes unbeatable again. She changed the display to show detailed intelligence about the core nexus. Delta Squad retrieved this data from the communications relay station 2 weeks ago. The nexus is defended by automated systems controlled by the same AI that we just confused. But those defenses are designed to repel large fleet actions, not small infiltration teams. You propose to assault the most heavily defended position in the galaxy with a handful of soldiers? General Kathvar asked incredulously. I propose to assault it with the right soldiers using the right approach at the right time, Hana corrected. While the AI is still trying to understand what happened here, before it can adapt its defenses to counter human tactics. Park stepped forward. Colonel, if you are talking about what I think you are talking about, Delta Squad volunteers for the mission. This is not a volunteer mission, Commander. This is a direct assignment. You, me, and 20 of the best special operations, soldiers from across the coalition. We jump to the Nexus system, infiltrate the central command facility, and destroy the AI core. And if we fail? Admiral Zephyr 9 asked quietly. If we fail, the Void Collective rebuilds its forces and continues this war for another decade. Millions, more soldiers die in battles across hundreds of worlds. If we succeed, the war ends today. The command center fell silent except for the quiet hum of ship systems and the distant sounds of damage control teams working throughout the fleet. Finally, General Kathvar spoke. What do you need from us, Colonel? 2 hours later, Hana found herself aboard a modified transport ship with the smallest military force she had ever commanded. 23 soldiers from 7 different species, all volunteers who understood they might not survive the next 6 hours. Delta Squad occupied one corner of the transport, checking their weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Sergeant Taman was preparing enough explosives to level a small city. Corporal Deho tested communication gear designed to work inside the Nexus's defensive barriers. Private Hyunwoo studied building plans on his tablet, memorizing every corridor and access route. Colonel, approaching the Nexus system, called the pilot. Defensive perimeter detected at maximum sensor range. Through the transport's small windows, Hana could see their destination. The core Nexus looked like a geometric nightmare floating in space. Crystalline structures twisted around central spires that pulsed with malevolent energy. Defensive platforms dotted the construction like metal thorns, each one capable of destroying a battleship. "Remember the plan," Hana announced to her team. "We have one advantage the enemy cannot counter. We are not trying to conquer this facility. We are not trying to hold it. We are going to get inside, destroy the central AI, and leave before their defensive systems understand what happened." The transport shuddered as it entered the outer defensive perimeter. Automated weapons fired at shadows and sensor ghosts, while the small ship slipped between detection grids like a fish swimming through a net. "Landing in 60 seconds, the pilot called. "Insertion point is exactly where you predicted, Colonel." "Of course it is," Hana replied calmly. AI defensive systems are logical. They protect the most important areas with the heaviest defenses and assume the least important areas are safe. They do not understand that sometimes the least important entrance is the most important tactical advantage. The transport touched down on a service platform deep within the Nexus structure. Around them, the enemy facility hummed with artificial life while automated systems continued their endless tasks. But no alarms sounded. No defensive forces responded. They were inside the most secure location in void collective space, and no one knew they were there. "Move fast, stay quiet, follow my lead," Hana whispered as the team moved through corridors that pulsed with alien technology. The AI core is 7 levels down and 2 kilometers toward the central spire. They encountered their first enemy soldiers, 15 minutes into the infiltration, a patrol of void collective units moving through the facility on routine inspection. The engagement lasted less than 30 seconds and left no survivors to raise an alarm. "Colonel, the facility layout is not matching our intelligence data," reported Sergeant Kim, a Draconian special operations soldier. "The AI has been modifying the internal structure." "Expected," Hana replied, consulting her own tactical display. "But it can only modify existing spaces. The core foundation of the structure cannot be changed. Follow me." She led them through maintenance tunnels and service corridors that the AI had not bothered to modify. Within an hour, they reached the central core chamber where the Void Collective's master intelligence processed information from across the galaxy. The AI core was beautiful and terrible. Streams of light flowed between crystalline processing nodes, while holographic displays showed tactical information from thousands of star systems. The artificial mind that had orchestrated 8 months of war against the coalition filled a chamber, the size of a football stadium. "Taman, place charges on the primary processing nodes," Hana ordered. "Hyunwoo, disable the backup power systems. Everyone else establish security perimeter. We have 10 minutes before this facility realizes what is happening." As her team worked, Hana approached the central command interface. Her fingers flew over alien controls as she accessed the AI's tactical database. What she found there made her blood run cold. "Park, we have a problem," she called quietly. "This AI has been learning faster than we thought. It has already developed countermeasures for every tactic we used in the last operation. Does that change the plan?" Park asked. "It makes the plan more important," Hana replied, continuing to work at the interface. "If this AI shares its knowledge with other Void Collective systems, every advantage we gained becomes useless." "Argue 1. Set," Taman reported. "Ready for detonation on your command." Hana downloaded the final pieces of tactical data and stepped back from the interface. Around them, the AI core continued its calculations, unaware that its destruction was imminent. Execute, she commanded. The explosions were synchronized and devastating. Primary processing nodes shattered in cascading chains of destruction, while backup systems overloaded and failed. The streams of light that connected the AI's thoughts flickered and died, as the artificial mind that had threatened the galaxy dissolved into electronic chaos. Alarms finally began to sound throughout the facility, as automated systems realized they had lost their controlling intelligence. But by then, Hana's team was already fighting their way back to the transport through corridors filled with defensive robots that could no longer coordinate their attacks. They reached the transport, as enemy reinforcements began arriving from other parts of the facility. The small ship lifted off while weapons fire filled the air around them, but without the AI to coordinate defensive actions, most of the shots missed their target. Nexus cores destroyed, Hana reported to the Coalition fleet as they cleared the facility's defensive perimeter. Void Collective Central Command is offline.